you holding up, Carrie?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not liking the stay-at-home stuff, though.
No.
No, that's awful. Too much togetherness. Been married way too long to spend this much time with him.
That's the beauty of having the little office in the basement.
I need to work on that.
Good evening, Miss Carrie.
Good evening, Carlos. How are you tonight?
So far, so good.
Good.
And honestly, I call it an office, but it's a folding table next to a desk.
Yeah,
Like,
it's close enough.
right?
I actually have an office, but it's the other end of the house, and
Mm-hmm.
Too far to walk?
yeah, kind of. This is a big house.
James, are you still there?
I'm here.
Quick question. If people want to get a hold of City Hall, like say building department, assessor, the clerk, who do they call? Or are we urging to email people?
Email is probably more. Email right now is easier to get a hold of people. But I know, like my office, I've got my phones transferring to my cell phone. A number of the offices have set that up as well.
Okay. All right.
So, and if anybody has trouble, they can always get a hold of me, and I can try and kick some tail feathers.
Transfer them.
I didn't transfer mine to my cell phone, but I get my voicemail messages and return them right away. So
They now has their voicemail set up to send an email when they get a voicemail.
oops, I knocked him over.
Oh no.
Ooh. Trying not to show all the M&Ms in my dining room here. My daughter swears it's the creepiest place in the world to eat dinner. I have a few. Yeah. All little M&M figurines up top.
I think you overwhelmed the Zoom camera for a minute.
It did. It's a little overwhelming. No idea why I just turned that goofy color.
We can still see you. You did get a little like orangish. Is that what you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. It's a
It's
little-
kind
I'm
of
not
like
showing up at all.
it's kind of like a vintage Polaroid right now.
all right. I'm feeling,
You feeling 70-ish?
yeah. Yeah, or 60 something. Like the
I meant the decade.
1860s. Talking vintage here.
All right. It's quiet here. So we have 1, 2, 3. Hopefully we get another one.
We need one more. Oh yeah, not him.
Not him.
Not him. Unless he's got
So
Mike with him.
when will you be back at the office?
Me?
Yeah.
Or just somebody from my office?
Well, somebody that's a notary.
Jessica, barring any bad things in the next couple of days, will be back on Thursday.
Okay, because we have, or I have the campaign compliance affidavit I have to fill out.
I can't come back until next week, so
Yeah, I don't think that there's any big rush for it, but either now or I'll forget about it for a year or so. All right,
Yay, quorum.
we got a quorum.
Hi. Hi.
That's a beautiful
Good.
thing.
Thank you. I didn't need my cake.
Now, James, will the Plant Moran be taking over the screen for their presentation?
Brian from Plant Moran will be. I'm gonna make him a co-host so he can share his screen when he gets on.
Okay. And that will work out. 2, 3, 4, 5. We're just missing Maureen and Donna. Donna calls in right on time usually. We have Lisa.
James, is everyone all better?
Yeah, we're great. We're great in the house here. Absolutely. Could do without this kind of dusting and rain.
Action item actually for tonight. Yes, they are.
Oh, good.
They
Okay.
have the
Thank you.
papers, and well, if we all say that we can, that they can, they will be. But the
Okay.
intent is to have it this Friday.
Very good.
This
Okay.
Friday starting.
I just thought with everything closed, maybe they would have missed it or whatever. So, very good.
All right. So we have Donna and Hennessy coming on board.
Mayor, we've got Donna identified.
Yep.
Me.
Donna identified as.
There we go. Very good.
Got Jim Hollinsworth.
Hey Jim, happy Thanksgiving. Glad you could be here.
Happy Thanksgiving to all you guys too. Glad to be here.
All right. We need to have our presenter though.
Tracy's there too, so I think we have everybody.
Or is he trying to scare me? All right.
Cricket.
Oh, Jim's even got video. Wow. Just in time, Kristen.
Hey, everybody. Good evening.
Good evening.
Alrighty. Well, the clock on my wall says 6 o'clock, and so we will call the special meeting of the Lincoln Park City Council to order. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like you to remain standing for a moment of silence, after which, for the passing of our Police Chief Ray Waters' father, who died last night. So, I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag
of the United
of the United
States of
States
America
of America,
and to the republic for which it
which
stands,
stands
one
one
nation
nation,
under God,
Under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice
and
for all.
justice for all.
I thank you for that. If we could have roll call, please.
Councilpersons Breeding,
I'm here on the phone.
Dupre. Higgins,
Here.
Ross,
Here.
Salcido,
Here via Zoom.
Tobin, and Mayor Carnes.
Here. All right, well, the purpose of our meeting for today is to have a special meeting, and it's for a water and sewer rate study. And we have Plant Moran representatives here that are going to be taking us through a presentation. Now, Brian, are you going to be doing the presentation?
I will be, but Kristen's going to start us off.
Kristen's going to start us off. Okay. We have Kristen Hunt from Plant Moran, one of the partners, right?
Yes.
All right.
I thought I would just be a kind of a friendly face to kind of kick this off since I've been working with you so long, and introduce my partner and friend, Brian Kamler, and his assistant, Jason, that works with him as well.
And he doesn't have a friendly face? Is that what you're saying? Okay. All right,
Well, you can
Chris.
see he looks very official with his suit jacket and everything on tonight. so.
Okay, as a point of keeping, Carrie, we have Councilwoman Tobin is on the
Right.
screen now. There she is.
Hello.
Hello. All right, then, Kristen, jump right into it. Go ahead.
Well, great. I just wanted to give you just a little bit of background for this water and rate study. As most of you know, the city has been passing along increases each year for water and sewer rates to the residents. So each year when we do our testing, we see that rate's going up a little bit. And so that rate has really helped to offset some of the operating costs that have gone on over the years. But what it really hasn't taken into account is any deferred maintenance or capital types of improvements that need to be made to the system. And so we've come to a point now where there's some significant improvements that need to be made for the system. And so there's really two things playing into this. So the state of Michigan has some recommendations of some very significant lead line replacements that they would like to see changed. And when Brian refers to that in his graph, when he'll kind of walk you through this scenario, it's the state of Michigan, and the department is called the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. So you'll hear that acronym of called EAGLE. So really that's what that is. And then also the city's engineers have identified some significant improvements that really need to be made because the system is aging, and you're starting to see some effects of that aging system with increased water loss over the years that keeps increasing. And so what Brian's just going to walk you through, really, it's really a math exercise. And so you compile the costs that it's going to take to do the normal operating costs of the system, to take care of repairs, and then to make those significant capital outlay improvements that are coming to fruition that need to be made, and kind of that comes up with, here's the total cost that we need, and then backs into what the rate structure needs to be and able to afford those types of improvements. like I mentioned there, these are deferred costs, so they're expensive things that have come to fruition. So there's some significant impacts on the rate. So it's going through these exercises of determining, whether that's an all-at-once type thing, how to smooth out the rates, or if it's something that there should be debt incurred so that you can pay for those and then spread out the costs over a year. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Brian.
All right,
Okay.
thank you, Kristen.
Welcome, Brian.
Thank you very much. So before we get into the details of your particular model, so we refer to it as a model. We build a model and we get input from the city, things that are fact. So you buy so much water a year from GLEWA. You sell so many units of water a year to your customers. You have administrative costs that are controlled within City Hall. Administrative costs, people have to read meters or you have to send out the bill. Things that are, wages and fringes, things that there's really not much of an argument. We know what we spend in that way. We take all of this information and we create a model. And as Kristen said, it becomes an exercise of math. And I'll show you the math. But it really harkens back to 9th grade algebra. If you remember 9th grade algebra, you spend an entire year trying to figure out how to solve for x. X is this one variable. You may have all these other operations that you do, but it all comes down to we're going to figure out what x is. And in the case of the water and sewer rate, we're going to figure out x, and x is going to be the rate that gets charged on a per unit basis to your customers. The rest of the stuff we know. There's a source to point to. And then once you verify all of those particular sources, what you're left with is X. And if you believe that I know how to use Excel and my team knows how to use Excel, and if you believe the inputs coming from your finance department, from your engineers, if you believe those inputs and you can follow along with the math, there's no arguing that what the model says at the end, it's X. And that's what we need to do because your system requires so much cash in order to pay your vendors, in order to buy water from GLEWA, in order to pay for sewage treatment, in order to pay for your people, in order to do repairs to the system. And so we know how much cash we're going to need to operate, in this case, over the next 10 years. And then all the rest of it is process of elimination. Yes, we know what this debt payment is. Yes, we know how much we pay our people. And at the end, you're going to come up with X. So I'm going to walk you through this. If you have any questions throughout, please feel free to jump in. Show you a PowerPoint that it should be in your packet as well. So hopefully you can see this PowerPoint says City of Lincoln Park Utility Rate Model. Can everyone see that?
Not yet. Oh, here it comes.
How about now?
Yes.
Here we
All
go.
right. Okay. So why are we doing this? Because you have substantial capital improvements that need to happen. So you've done some over the years, but if you compare your water and sewer system to your house, the amount of repair and replacement that you need to do right now is comparable to needing a new roof, windows, HVAC, and driveway all at the same time. And if you're a homeowner, you know those are the 4 things that are the most expensive. Those 4 things need to get replaced in your water and sewer system. And the price tag is substantial. You do not have the cash on hand in order to do these replacements yourself. And as we get into it, you'll see that you have actually very little to no cash on hand in the water and sewer system. You've been borrowing on an operational basis from your general fund. The model is set up over a 10-year period. Why 10 years? Well, 5 years was actually not long enough in order to generate enough cash through your rates. And the capital replacements that you have to do are actually mandated by Eagle over 20 years. So why not go to 20? Anytime you do a projection, and if you go out too far, all of the assumptions that you use when you do that projection, they start to compound on each other. So you might be a little bit overly conservative in a couple years, but when you compound that overly conservative approach over a long period of time, the numbers start to become unrealistic. So we capped it at 10. Normally I do 5, but given the substantial improvements that you need to do, 10 made more sense for you. And you're not going to be able to do all of this work that has to be done with the cash on hand or the cash that is coming in from your customer. You're going to have to finance some of it. And you finance it through bonds or DWRF or SRF or programs through the state. But it is going to require you to finance this over a period of time. That period of time is going to be 20 years, but we're just going to show, for the purposes of the model, the first 10 of the repayments. At the end of the model, you're going to get, I'll walk through what that goal is and why it's calculated that way. You currently have a small component of your rate structure that's fixed. There's a $2.55 charge per quarter. We're going to change the terminology on that. It's currently called a meter charge, but we're going to change that to readiness to serve, and I'll explain in a second why we're going to do that. So this is on a cash needs basis. We want to have enough cash coming in order for it to go out again. But we're not going to worry about things like depreciation expense. That's an accounting concept. What we're really concerned with is, do you have enough money in the bank to pay your bills? And so we're going to do this all on a cash basis. There are some communities, there aren't very many of them, but there are some that would use depreciation. And they would fund their capital outlay by charging that depreciation to their customers and accumulating a very large sum of cash in order to make a cash payment when they have to replace a water main or do any kind of major system repairs. The downside of doing that is you end up charging your customers a lot more than you might necessarily have to. The cash needs basis is more efficient for your customers. We talked about the 10 years, and we talked about the change in the terminology from meter charge to readiness to serve. So the next several slides, the model goes in steps, and this will be reminiscent of your 9th grade algebra. So step 1 is we have to figure out the total cost pool. These are the things that you're going to spend your money on. These are the things you already spend your money on. So we put them in 4 different buckets. Bucket number 1, you buy water from GLEWA, you pay DUA for sewage treatment. Bucket 2 is all the capital outlay that we've been talking about. Number 3 is debt service, both what you already have and a few proposed new debt issuances. We know your existing debt payments. You get a schedule when you issue a debt. Here's the next 20 years worth of payments. We just take those schedules. For the proposed debt, we had to make some ballpark guesses. Those numbers are going to change, but not substantially. When you go through the process of issuing debt, you will get the final set in stone debt service schedule. And then internal operations. And I notice here that I have a typo, that the letter N is missing from the word internal. Internal is not a word. Don't worry, it's not a new thing you have to learn. It should be internal operations, meaning the people that are reading the meters and sending out the bills and the people working on making the fixes. And that becomes your total cost pool. Step 2, we take that total cost pool, and from that we subtract some of the minor miscellaneous revenues. Your current meter charge, the future readiness to serve charge, things like penalties and interest for customers that pay their bills late, some tap-in fees, some interest from the bank when you do have cash earning interest. So we're going to take away those miscellaneous revenues from the cost pool, and what is left are the costs that have to be recovered through the variable rate. Step 3, calculate the variable rate. Well, we now know, based on step 2, how much money we have to generate through this variable rate. And we're going to spread that over the units that we sell to our customers. Now, there are assumptions, and we'll talk about those in a minute, about how many units you actually sell. But if just basic algebra, you're going to take that cost to be recovered divided by the units sold. That would normally equal how much we charge our customers. But because this is a multi-year model, we have step 4. So now that we have that amount that we have to charge our customers, we're going to spread it out over this period of 10 years. And we're going to bake in an annual increase. Everything goes up. The cost of everything increases every year. Your cable bill, your cell bill, your consumer's bill, your water bill is no different. The cost of water, cost from GLEWA goes up, the cost from DUA goes up, the cost of your employees goes up, all the other operational costs, your other vendors, everything goes up. And so the water bill should be treated the same. And so the model says we're going to have a smooth increase. We don't want to have 20% in one year and 1% the next, and then maybe it's flat for a year and then we do another 20%. That causes chaos in the marketplace. Your customers do not like that. Nobody likes that. But if you can get it down to a manageable percent every year, then people grow accustomed to it. Another client that Kristen and I have a shared history working with, they've been doing this for like 25 years. And every year when the audit's done, then they do an update to the water model, and they update the assumptions and they update the history, and they have this smooth rate. And every year they've got it now down to a science where it's 2 to 4% every year. And the township board passes it 7-0 every year. The customers don't get up in arms because they're used to it. They have learned that to expect an increase, and as long as that increase is within their expectation, then they talked earlier about a target of working capital. So we're going to end up with, at the end of the 10 years, we're going to have so much cash in the bank. Right now, you really don't have any. You're borrowing from general fund. And so, but we want you to have cash. Water and sewer is an enterprise activity. Enterprise means like a business. It's not supposed to borrow from anyone else, or at least not from the general fund. It should stand on its own. You know, long-term borrowing for debt service, that's fine, that's normal. But for operational cash, water and sewer should have its own. So when we build these models, our end goal is not only to be able to pay our bills, but have an amount in the bank at the end of the period. So it could be up to 4 different buckets of money. But in your case, we only did 3. Why 3 instead of 4? Because you're doing such substantial capital improvements over the next few years. It's going to be like you have a brand new system, or at least a very much improved, very much more modern system. And so you're not going to have all of the, when we're done here, you're not going to have all of the capital needs planned out that need to happen. You're going to get some life out of them. So we're going to focus on the first 3. Number 1, the operating reserve. You pay your vendors faster than your customers pay you. So you have to have some money in the bank to pay your vendors while you wait for your customers to pay you. The rule of thumb is 1 month on top of your billing cycle. So if you bill every month, have 2 months in reserve. If you bill every 2 months, have 3. You bill quarterly, so have 4, 120 days. 1 year worth of debt service payments is bucket number 2. So paying a debt payment, it's a big ticket item. You're cutting a big check. And so you have to have enough money in the bank to pay that payment. But as soon as you empty that bucket by making the payment, you got to refill it again. So at the end of every billing year, every cycle year, and now at the end of the 10 years of the model, you want to have the subsequent year's debt service payment ready to go. And then the emergency capital replacement bucket also known as the oops, something broke reserve. So even when you have a new system or newer system, even when you've done all this work, oops, something broke. And that could be water main freeze if we have a really terrible winter. I mean, there's many reasons why you might have an oops, something broke. But you got to have enough cash in the bank to make that repair. You don't have time to finance an oops, something broke. These are normally for a municipality that buys water and sewage treatment from a third party instead of doing it their own or with their own treatment plant. If you're a buyer of this service, then we usually say 2% of the net book value of your capital assets. But in this case, over the 10 years, you're putting millions of dollars into that. So the likelihood, number one, the likelihood of the oops, something broke is going to go down. But number two, if we calculated it based on the new net book value of all these new capital assets, that reserve would spike significantly. And we don't think you would need quite that much money in the bank. So instead of saying 2%, we're saying 1%. But again, you're starting with zero because you've been borrowing from general fund. So step one, calculate your cost pool. So in your case, so you're buying water from GLEWA. So you may have heard the term water loss. Not every drop of water that you buy from GLEWA makes its way to a customer. Through the system, there are leaks. Water leaves the system. It doesn't make it to a customer. And that could be because there was a water main break, or the fire department had to fight fires, and that water coming out of the hydrant was not metered. It could also be just regular maintenance of your water and sewer department, flushing out sections of line. But so there's good reasons why you don't sell 100% of the water you buy. But currently, the city of Lincoln Park is losing 37% of the water that you buy before it makes its way to a customer. 5 years ago, that was 20%. So something is going on. And it could be more than one thing. But that water is coming into the city and then disappearing. So this is a serious problem. But for the purposes of the model, instead of saying we're going to lose 37% a year every year for the next 10 years, we've said you're going to lose 37% for the next 2 years. That gives you 2 years to figure out where this problem is and then fix it. So at the end, after those 2 years, we're dropping that number back down to 20%, which is where it was 5 years ago. 20% is still fairly high. It's not crazy for a system of your age. In a well-maintained, modern over the next 20 years. We have baked in an assumption that GLEWA and DUA are both going to raise your rates. They've actually been fairly reasonable increases coming from them the last couple of years. And so we're just continuing on based on what they've been charging you or at the rate increases that they've been passing on. On debt service, so you already do have a new SRF that started in the last year. That was $1 million of borrowing. And so we've included that in the debt service repayments. And then we've added 2 new SRF loans for $4 million apiece, one in 2022, one in 2024. And that will cover a substantial part of some of the repairs that are already on deck. Can you borrow even more than that? Yes, absolutely. Do you have to borrow these 2? Well, no, it's not set in stone. And you're not committed to these things yet. But as you'll see when we get into the different scenarios that we ran, you have to borrow something. Otherwise, if you are going to pass on the 100% of the costs on these repairs to the current customers, the rate increases that you will have to adopt are you can do it, but it would be very, very difficult to raise rates to that extent. And we'll get into that in a little bit. The capital outlay, as we've said several times, very substantial. So the biggest one is the lead service line replacement. So you have older homes, you have older lines. Once upon a time, those lines were put in with lead pipes. We don't use lead anymore because it's not safe. But Eagle is telling us over the next 20 years, you have to dig out what's down there that's lead, and you have to replace it with modern plumbing on your dime. The bill right now is $78 million or $3.9 million a year over 20 years. That is a tremendous amount of money. And when we get to it, you'll see what it would really be like if you were going to finance this yourself over the next 10 years of the model at $3.9 million a year. Now, you also have a mandate from Eagle about making changes to your sanitary sewer system. So you have a plan that's been adopted, that Hennessy's helped you with. That totals $37 million over the next 20 years. And then there are other projects that are we only have them baked into the model over the next 10 years, and that totals about of the system. Okay, so once we've identified all those costs, now we have to address the readiness to serve charge. So what is a readiness to serve? The idea is whether or not a customer uses any water, they still have the ability to turn on their faucet and get water. And even though they may not turn on the faucet, you as the city have incurred a cost to give them the opportunity to turn it on. Like I said, with the meter reader, well, we're going to send you a bill, even if you used one drop or you used 1 million, but someone still has to read the bill or read the meter. Someone has to send the bill. The bill has to go through the mail. You have to put a stamp on it, regardless of whether it's 1 million gallons or it's 1 drop. So there's these costs that need to be recouped. And so you have an opportunity to charge somewhere near in the ballpark. It's either 0% of it, some communities don't use a fixed charge at all, or 100% of it. You could say that you're going to charge the cost of water and sewer on a commodity basis. So you use a gallon of water, you pay for a gallon of water, but everything else is fixed. We all have the same opportunity to turn on the faucet. So it's up to you as a city to determine where on that spectrum between 0% and 100% are we comfortable with. Now, one of the things to think about, and we think about this every time we put these together, the higher the fixed charge, the more significant the impact is to the low volume user. So think about who your low volume users are. It's usually, the elderly or small family, couple, individual person. The larger the fixed charge is, that low end user is getting hurt more. The high end user, they pay more when they use more, but they're impacted less by the fixed as a percentage of their overall bill. Now, when we first did the model, we went through a few variations before it got to the point where it's ready for prime time. And in the first version of the model, we started with 25%. We're going to recoup 25% of our admin costs through this readiness to serve. And when we did that, your management team said that is a very significant jump. Let's go with a lower number. So we dialed it down to 13.5%. And so still a significant jump for your smallest meter right now.
Problem with that? Crazy.
Your smallest meter is paying $2.55 a quarter. Under this 13.5% recoupment, cents is still low. I took a look.
Brian,
at-
you didn't come across with that. You blanked out for a moment. If you could get what the cost would be again.
At 13.5%, you customers in the 5/8 to 1 inch meter would be paying $9.21 per quarter. Allen Park is currently paying $22. Plymouth Township pays $21. Northville pays $15.51. But now Southgate doesn't have one at all. So there's a spectrum, and you have to choose where on the spectrum you are. But keep in mind, no matter what number you pick, the system needs the same amount of cash. The readiness to serve charge and the commodity rate is just the vehicle by which we collect money from our customers. But at the end of the day, we need the same amount of money. So if you reduce the readiness to serve, you increase the commodity rate. There's no getting around that. At the end of the day, we need the same amount of cash. I mentioned the 5/8 to the 1 inch meter are paying that. The larger meters, so when you go up to a multifamily home or a commercial property, their meter is going to be a 2 inch or a 3 inch or a 4 inch. The rate charged goes up based on your meter size. There's a table provided by the American Water and Wastewater Association. We just follow that table. So this isn't a Plant Moran recommendation. It's not the city of Lincoln Park doing it. We're following the industry standard. Here's the table. And if you went down from 13.5% to 5%, if you went up to 50%, you're still going to be on the table. The 2 inch meter pays so much more than the 1 inch meter. All right, calculating the variable rate. So units sold. We talked before that you're buying enough water that you're losing 37% of it before it gets to your customers. And you can see that here in this table. So this table is showing the water purchased from GLEWA and the water units sold to your customers. The far right column is just showing how much of that we lost. But here's the kicker. Look at the gallons sold. You're selling less water year over year, but you're having to buy more. So even though you're selling less, you're buying more and more and more and more because you're losing it through the water loss. If you can solve that water loss problem, the number that on the cost side, you'll benefit substantially, and it'll just make a lot more sense. Now, over these 5 years that we're showing this 5-year history, that when the census is finalized, it could be just through better water technology, things like low flow showers and toilets and that sort of thing. It could also be that your meters aren't working 100% effectively. There's no way for us to tell that, but we know that your meters are newer, so you would hope that they are still working well, but that's something to look into as well. But the fact is, so what we ended up doing is we said it's going to continue dropping for a few more years, but not all 10. We're just assuming that there is a floor and that eventually you're going to hit the floor and then maintain the floor on your sales. Could it be that it keeps going down? Yes. But the idea is that you're going to keep updating this model. And so as you get more information, you'll get an even clearer picture after a few years of what that trend is going to be. And then the final step 4 is spreading it all out. So this is kind of the magic of the model, is doing the math to get it to be an increase year over year. And at the end, have enough cash in the bank. So as I said, you currently don't have any, at least in water and sewer, because you're borrowing from general fund. But at the end of the 10 years of the model, water is going to have 1.2 million, sewer will have 3. And you might say, Brian, that 4.2 million is a lot of money for us to have in the bank. And you're right, 4.2 million is a lot. However, that 4.2 million, if you refer back several slides to where we talked about how to fill those buckets, this is the bare minimum industry recommendation. the operating reserve, the debt service reserve, and the oops, something broke reserve. This is the bare minimum of what you should have in the bank. It should just tell you how far you are from that bare minimum today. You've been borrowing money from general fund for several years now because you're spending money faster than you can bring it in. Your rates have not kept up with the needs of the system. All right, so now, thank you for your patience on all that preamble, but here's where the rubber hits the road. So when we have all of that information, we have it baked into the model, and we've double and triple checked it, what it shows is it would be incredibly difficult for you to raise enough cash through your rates. So we do this 10-year spread, and we have an even rate increase every year. With all those things that we talked about, the capital that you have to do, the debt service that's planned, your operational costs, buying stuff from GLIWA and paying DUA, you would have to raise your every year for 10 years. Sewer would go up 11% every year for 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, you would have that $4.2 million in the bank. But the problem is in the middle between today and year 10. That's what this graph in the lower left corner is showing. This blue line is below zero. It's negative. It represents the amount of money that you would have to borrow from general fund in order to pay for this construction, pay your vendors. At the trough, the bottom end of this graph, you would have borrowed $16 million from general fund. And after that point, from years 5 up to 10, you pay it back. And between years 9 and 10, you cross zero and get to that 4.2 million. This trough is not doable. It's not feasible. General fund doesn't have $16 million to lend you, and they're not going to. So this is just not a viable option. We couldn't do what we normally do, which is spread this rate increase evenly. So then we said, all right, we got to pull something out. We have to do something different. And so we started with the $78 million for lead line and just said, just yank it out. We know we still have to do it. The city's still responsible for it. But for the purposes of the model, we're going to say there's another solution. There's a different solution that we'll have to find. Let's just focus on the other Eagle improvements, the other $9 million of capital, and dealing with what we can deal with in-house. What do the rates have to be then? So you still have the RTS at 13.5%, and it's going to go up at inflation every year. Your water increase drops from 15 down to 4% every year for 10 years. Sewers stays the same because the lead line replacement is just a water issue, not a sewer issue. At the end of 10 years, you hit $4.2 million again. But you'll notice from this graph, you're still going negative to the tune of $5 million over the first 5 years. That's $5 million you would have to borrow from general fund while your rates go up and your customers pay you, and eventually you accumulate enough cash to pay general fund back. General fund can't afford $5 million either. So this is not a viable option of just pulling out the lead line replacement and doing a 10-year smooth rate increase. But a good nugget of information that comes out of this is that it's not just Eagle and lead line. It's not just the lead line replacement that's for your other capital improvements. That's enough to cause this problem that a 10-year smooth increase doesn't solve. So the Eagle thing is substantial. We'll have a slide in a page or two that's going to deal with that. But for now, let's just put that one aside. You still need a significant rate increase in order to pay for these things that you have control of in-house. And that leads us to scenario number 3. So we haven't changed the model for anything that we've talked about. with the exception of the lead line, and instead of a 10-year smoothed increase, we're going to do a 1-year, I call it a jump start, a 1-year jump start increase, followed by 9 years of a smoothed rate increase. So in year one, yank the Band-Aid off quick and raise rates combined for water and sewer by 25%. And then smoothed increase years 2 through 10. You still end up with $4.2 million at the end of 10 years, but you'll notice that the blue line never really dips below zero. I mean, it does for a period of time, but it's very small. And it may from month to month, depending on what you're spending on capital versus when your customers pay you. But for the most part, water and sewer stands on its own. General fund is not negatively impacted. So you do this jump start rate in year one, and then the thereafter, water doesn't need a rate increase. It actually is covered by that 25% in year one. Sewer drops from 11 down to 8% every year thereafter, years 2 through 10. So this is a viable option. I understand that it's not appealing. I will tell you, it's also not the worst jumpstart increase that one of my clients had to do. I won't tell you who it is. It's not close by to you, but they had to raise their sewer rate 75% the first year, and then go into a 5 or 7% increase thereafter. So it's still significant, but this is not the worst I've ever seen. But this just takes care of the 37 million of sewer improvements and the 9 million of the other improvements. This doesn't do anything for the lead line. The lead line problem is still there. So as we mentioned before, this is mandated by Eagle. This is coming from the state of Michigan. They have not been that can still change. Maybe that can still happen. Maybe they can be more lenient, and instead of 20 years, it'll be 30 years. Maybe they can provide a funding vehicle. But if we just pay $3.9 million a year for the next 20 years, in addition to the rate increase that we just talked about, it would be an additional $37 to $41 per unit, per 1,000 cubic feet. So this would effectively double what you're paying right now, or excuse me, what your customers are paying right now. So you could issue bonds, you could get financing theoretically through the state. I suppose it would also be possible for some kind of property tax levy. But these are discussions that you need to have internally and that you need to have with Eagle to find out what kind of options or allowances might they extend you. Because it's not going away. You're going to have to do it one way or the other. It's just a question of how do you finance it? How quickly do you have to pay it back?
I think a part of the benefit, though, of having a tool like this where you can really illustrate with Eagle when you're having those discussions with them of, like, if you're explaining affordability, when you can really, demonstrate with us the math that the impact it's going to have on your residents. You'll be able to
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Sure.
This is Councilwoman Breeding. Anyways, I have a question. That other community that you said had to raise it 75%, how in the world do you go about explaining it to the residents clearly enough to where they have a fit now on any time we put through any type of an increase on water or sewer? So you got any tips? How in the world do you get this across?
Well, we did the exact same thing there that we're doing right now. We gave a presentation, we talked it through, we explained the math, we demonstrated through graphs and charts the situation that community was in, and we did it in a public meeting. I was in city council chambers and doing the exact same dog and pony show, showing what this is. And
Okay.
they didn't enjoy it. It was not a fun conversation that we had. But they did it. They understood at the end that they had to, that they financially they had no other recourse, and they
Okay.
passed it.
All right, thank you.
So what does this really mean to a customer? I mean, we're talking about the system as a whole and the rate increases that are necessary, but what does this mean? What does it do? So on the left side of this slide, we have your current rate, the 1 year proposed that has the 25% jump start in it, and then years 2 through 10 thereafter. On the right side, in that different shades of blue, that is what, in dollars and cents, if you pay X amount now, here's what you're going to pay next year, here's what you're going to pay the year after. So if your water bill, when you get it, is $50, next year you pay $68.53. It's a 37% increase. So that's the 25% on the commodity rate, plus the increase to the readiness to serve, going from 255 to 921. But in the next year and years 2 through 10, it's a 4.4% increase every year. If your bill currently is $100, it goes up to 131. That's a 31% increase. Why is it different than the smaller bill? It's based on volume. So there's a rate increase on the readiness to serve, and there's a rate increase on the commodity. As your commodity goes up or down, your overall bill goes up by a different percentage than your neighbor. But if you pay $100 now, you pay 131 next year, and the year after that, 4.6%. So you can see from the table that the higher your bill is now, the lower the percent increase is next year. But thereafter, within a tenth or a 20th of a percent, everyone gets treated the same thereafter. But again, and I have to keep saying it, this is excluding the lead line replacement. So if I would recommend, whatever you decide right now or in the very near future, that you pass one rate increase to do these improvements. The lead line would be either a separate charge, or if it ends up being a millage, but you just treat it as its own thing. And so you can say, well, here's what is internal to the city. This is our rate increase. And then here is the lead line charge that we're mandated by state law, the state of Michigan. We can't do anything else about it. We had to do this. Here's what it costs. And so you keep that line bifurcating those two charges. So that's it in terms of the prepared comments. I'll go back to this slide in case you still want to talk about it. Do you have any other questions?
Brian, I do. This is Councilwoman Ross.
Yeah, go ahead.
You've got the proposed increase for residents for that meter charge of $2.55 to $9.21, and we talked about the bigger the meter, the bigger the charge is going to be. So, what is proposed for the multifamily and the commercial properties?
So right there in the bottom corner of this graph is every meter size that you have. So currently, if you have a 1-inch meter, your folks are paying $4.10, not $2.55. So that $4.10 goes up to $9.21 as well. So it's funny. Residential water meters, for whatever reason, I'm sure one of the engineers could tell us, but it just varies. Some places have a 5/8, some has a 3/4. You might have one and your neighbor has the other, and your houses are nearly identical in every other way. So what we propose is the residential, basically 1 inch and under, all gets treated the same. And then 1.5 and above pays that graduated increase.
Okay.
Councilman Ross, what I think that we would do would be take some we'd pull several current bills that were out there and then explain by, that, how it's going to affect the various people. We take actual bills and then we'll plug the numbers in, and then people will have a realization of what it's going to cost them in the end.
Right. I think that's a great idea, Mayor. Because I think you're right. I'm like, this is going to be like a sticker shock. And although we understand the issues that we have, it's just, it's hard because I certainly don't want to create a hardship for people, and especially today with the high unemployment. But I do have another question.
Go ahead.
If we can go back to the rate model step 3, where we're calculating the estimate the volume of water and sewer to be sold, and we're saying that we're at a loss, that we keep losing water. How do we actually know that it? How do we know it? I guess basically is what it boils down to, because I'd like to know if there's water that we're losing that's not metered, and how do we compare that versus what we just didn't use? Because I know that we're buying water in like bulk, right?
Well, you're paying there. You have a master meter, so all the water that's coming into the city comes through in I think it's just one place. Someone else can correct me. So we know that that's one fixed data point. We have the bills from GLEWA. We know how much money we bought. Then how much you sold, we ran reports out of your utility billing software. Rather, your staff ran them for us. But we know in any given year, here's how many units we sold. And what this table shows is over 5 years, we're selling less and less, and we're buying more and more.
So if we know how much actually from that master meter, how much of that is how much are we actually losing that?
Well, so, I mentioned some things that, everyone has water loss because you've got a fire department, or you clean the lines, or everyone is going to have some number of water main breaks when the temperature gets really cold.
Okay.
That amount that you lose normally, or you just don't, you use it internally, as it were, that's a drop in the bucket, really. So, the best, most watertight system that I've worked with, they have a water loss of 3%. Now, they've been doing $5 to $10 million of capital improvements every year for the last 20 years. So, they've got a state-of-the-art system, and they still lose 3% a year.
Those are newer communities too, aren't they, Brian? Like some of if you see
Absolutely.
like the townships, that over time have really just grown really quickly. So they have, larger populations, but really new pipes because they've just been built with the subdivisions. But when you have a, mature community like that, you could have pipes that are seeping, pipes that are breaking. We've worked with communities before that have water main breaks underneath a canal or water, so they don't even know, because normally you'll see a water main break somewhere and somebody's road's flooded or something, and so you're able to identify that and go get it fixed. But this is obviously something that's either down too deep or under a waterway or something where it's not able to be, or just old seeping pipes that are all just seeping. That's
Right. Well, it's good to see that you, though, have evidence that as you make improvements, you are seeing that water loss come down. However, I do have one more question in regards to that water loss. At 37%, can you give me what that equals to in dollars?
I could figure that out, but it would take me a few minutes.
Okay. So later then. I think that's all I have for right now, Mayor.
All right, we would be looking to initiate this for the 2021-22 budget. Is that when we would have to start with this?
That would be a management decision. I mean, you could do it now, or you can wait for the next budget.
Your Honor, through the chair,
Yes, sir, go ahead.
I have a question. I don't know if Hennessy would have the answer or even our own city manager. This is a state mandate. This from Eagle. Part of it is, and state mandates. They're illegal to give you a mandate without funding it, but the state does it all the time. Is there any works with other communities that are fighting this? Is there or banding together to look for another solution, or is there anything like that out there at all that we can talk about, or do you have any knowledge of?
If I may, Mayor,
Sure.
there was some legal action that took place. I want to say it was probably 2 years ago now. It was definitely happening in Oakland County, but it was unsuccessful.
Well, that doesn't mean we can't raise a stink about it and complain.
True.
And it may.
Councilman, no. One thing is that we are looking to maybe take this information that Brian and his team has compiled and present that we have additional hardships and maybe extend it out further beyond the 20 years of the lead line replacement requirement. But that's our best approach.
Yeah, I think so, and work with Treasury, and maybe we can get some help with that aspect of it.
In really, city, I know this is a bleak picture that Brian's painted.
Really?
But the city has done a lot of significant improvements lately. We really have, for the first time, a real roadmap with water and sewer and improvements that have to be done. And now we can have these, as the mayor mentioned, some discussions with Treasury to extend things because we have facts behind us. Before, it was always a little bit ambiguous in a sense, but now we've got some really to demonstrate that rate increases might be untenable sense to some of our, and if we can extend some of these improvements that have to go out beyond 20 years, we're still within the spirit of the law, but, we need some special consideration because of our financial position.
All right, James, as we're going through this, a couple things. I'm be interested in when the water meters were last changed. If we're showing significant loss changes right around the time that these meters were installed, then we may be having a problem in the meters with all of that. So that's one thing that I would like to have checked.
With the meters?
Yeah, with the meters, because if we track down where this additional water loss comes down, and if it correlates to the time that we put these newer meters in, then that may be an issue. I think the city manager, Matt Copper, was looking at having the results of actual how much water was being lost in town by having a meter checked. John from Hennessy may be aware of that their estimates of what we're actually using was not correct.
That's correct, Mayor. Yeah, we were looking at doing we had done a Doppler test, I think about 6 years ago, maybe it was 14, 15, that we found some areas, as Brian had mentioned, that were going right into the sanitary system, and they didn't arise. Generally when you have a water main break, it's very visible immediately, but if it can get what they call hydraulic tunneling to an outlet, a storm system, a sanitary system, but 37% is just unrealistic.
Yeah, and then, so my recommendation would be to continue to look into that and maybe put a little more emphasis into that and push it to see if we can get a final resolution on that. And then James mentioned that we need to, as we're going forward in this, we're going to need to explain to everyone what it actually is going to cost. If you talk about per unit or whatever, I would suggest taking actual water bills and then plug it in with that. I mean, you can do that with mine and use maybe a couple other examples over there to see so people actually see what it is that they're gonna be paying. And then the other thing I'd recommend is we're going through this one meeting is not going to do it. I think we're gonna have to go out in the public and make presentations when we're able to. If we're talking about over 25% increases, it has to be done. It looks like it has to be done, but we're gonna need to explain it and be there to answer the questions and take the heat if necessary for it.
Through the chair, Your Honor. would you
Yes,
get a
sir, go ahead.
chance?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Councilman Salcido, I just have mostly comments, but in regards to the 37% water loss, I've witnessed, as everyone else has, we have water main breaks in the summertime. Winter's coming. Would you attribute the water loss to water main breaks, or like Kristen was saying, we have a seepage underneath the canal, which out to the residents. You just can't, and we're all saying the same thing. But are other cities near us in a similar position where we can say, well, for instance, example, Southgate's in the same situation and they're about to raise their rates because of their infrastructure being old too. So can we relate with other communities in a similar situation with us? So those are my comments if anybody wants to chime in.
Well, I can handle the water loss question. This is, when you have 37%, we have a situation where one of three things are happening. Either the GLEWA meter is not functioning correctly and they're overcharging us. That's very unlikely. They're very cognizant on maintaining their meters. They run dye tests through them. So there's diagnostics that get run through these meters to make sure that they're reading correctly. Or our meters are reading so slow, meaning that we sell 10 gallons, but we only record 9 to our users, or which is possible. That's a potential scenario. But the fact that 10 years into our meters, they shouldn't be running that slow, or we're having significant breaks where water is being discharged into a sanitary system or storm system and not being recorded. The 37% is not from water main breaks. That is extremely excessive. And I would expect, Brian mentioned 8 to 12. I would expect us to be around 13 to 14, 15% would be, I think, a good number for us. We have literally 130 miles of water main through there. And the only way to really do that test is to do a Doppler test through the city, which we did a few years ago, 6 years ago. Listen to the water main. You can hear the water gushing out, and that's when they locate. We located a few years ago a significant break under Dix through there. I think Brian could probably talk more about the neighboring communities.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have not recently for any of your neighbors. I did one for Allen Park, but it's been probably 3 or 4 years. The lead line problem, it is community by community based. This year, and it's not that big of a window, but if the majority of the city was built in that window, your cost is like Lincoln Park's. But if you were developed, 5 or 8 years later, then maybe only 10% of the community has the lead line. So it's really community by community, and ones that I thought might be higher, it turns out that they are 10 years newer, 10 years younger than what Lincoln Park is. So that's why that one needs to be treated separately. But in terms of your own increases, your own improvements that are needed, it's not crazy to have double-digit rate increases in order to do this much capital. You've got a lot to do, and I don't like comparing one community to another because they are so different. So you're a bedroom community. If one of your neighbors is more industrial, their customer base is just different. And if you paid cash for your improvements previously versus somebody that financed them, well, that community has higher debt service than you do, or vice versa. So I know it's a little bit trite, but every community is unique. But you have to live on your own and up to your own. So as long as you trust the inputs that were given to us, and you trust our ability to use Excel and do 9th grade algebra, the result, solving for X, it's not disputable.
And one thing I'd like to mention, and Brian, I know you probably haven't done the calculation, but it's the water loss increase jumping from 20% to 37% does not run $5 million a year.
No.
I don't want the council to think that this is millions and millions and millions. It's something we have to address because we have to be efficient in how we operate the system. And there's been a environment in the system at this point that's causing that no one is able to visibly see it. So we have to go out there, and I think the mayor is correct. We need another Doppler test to really hone in on where these things are. But I don't want the council to have the impression that this water loss is a $5 million charge that we're getting annually. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Brian, or just,
No, I agree. It's a
hundreds
problem.
of thousands of dollars, but it's not the difference.
Yeah. The cost increases that I'm calculating, or we calculated, it's due to capital and debt service that's financing cap.
Yeah. But when you get down to it, we're asking for a significant amount of.
Okay, ask one question of Lisa.
Well, just a second.
I'm sorry.
We're asking for a significant amount of increase from our residents here. And so what we need to do is make sure that our house is in order to show them that this is exactly what is needed and we're not wasting the funds that they have. That means that we have to find out where the 37% loss is, and we have to make sure that our equipment is operating the way that it should, to be fair. Councilwoman Breeding, go ahead.
Is Lisa still? Yeah, Lisa's still here. The city borrowed money from the water and sewer fund. I'm curious, have we paid that back totally? He's saying there's no money in water and sewer, so is that loan paid off, or are we still paying on it?
We have been paying on it, very small amounts, but you'll see when the audits present it to you that we actually paid the amount in full back at the end of the year. So
we did?
Yeah, that actually took us out of the negative at the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Thank you for that. Anything else from council?
Through the chair, please.
This is.
I'm sorry, this is Councilman Dupre.
Yes,
For some reason, my camera's not working.
Oh, yeah.
So,
go ahead.
Being new, I just want to make sure that we're communicating properly to the citizens, or that I would be. This is not the quote-unquote infrastructure problem that we were talking about for flooding issues and things like that? Or is that part of this? Because this says water and sewage, but
it doesn't have anything to do with flooding as far as I know.
Okay,
this
so
is
that's
just
a separate issue.
This is the water that's coming in.
Okay, so total separate issue.
Yeah, it's about.
Mayor, it does address some of the water, and it does some of the flooding through there. The $37 million that is mandated on the sanitary for 20 years by does require us about $1 million a year in lining to prevent excess water from entering our sanitary system, which will prevent flooding from occurring. As Brian mentioned, there's two $4 million outlays in 2024. Those are for the Emmons and the Lincoln pump stations, which were built in 38 and 42 and have been identified as needing replacements within the next 3 to 5 years through there. So it does address the flooding issue to limit come through there.
But not entirely what we're talking about here, not the amount of flooding that we've had most recently with the large rain events. I mean,
Right.
it will help towards
You're
that,
right, Mayor.
but that's not the significant part of what it is that we're moving forward with this, right? It's not, the 1 million out of all the millions that we have to pay is towards that, but the primary cause is to cover the water lines coming in, right? That's what we're trying to get the capital together for?
It's a combination of the water and sewer all through there. But you're right. But it does tighten up our system substantially compared to. And our goal is obviously, as we presented earlier, is to prevent any SSOs at year 20 with the Eagle.
Okay,
And that's sanitary sewer overflows into the Ecorse Creek.
Councilwoman Dupree, not to jump on you, did you want to go further into that? Do you have another question?
No, I'm clear. I see it as a separate issue. I understand this may help, but we do have the other issue as well.
Yeah, it's separate, but it's together.
Thank you. Yeah, right.
Is there anything else from council?
Mayor, if I could, just,
Yes,
I
go
just
ahead.
want to say, I want to say thank you for your previous comments about us getting our house in order. I think you put that very well. I just don't feel right in going out and asking our residents and our businesses to pay more and we're all paying for waste. It just doesn't make sense. So thank you for your words. Thank you.
So there's no misunderstanding. This work has to be done. We can't continue to do it this way. I mean, we're mandated by the state to do the lead lines as much as we hate that they're putting it on us and they're not giving us any kind of help for it. But most of our water lines were done in the 30s and the 40s, and it's come to that time where it needs to be repaired. Anything else from
Your Honor,
council?
through the chair.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
We've all stressed that if we're going to the public, we have to be able to explain what we're going through. And we've mentioned several times, we talk about capital improvement, and I think most of us know exactly the capital improvement we're talking about. But I'm not so sure that we have made it clear enough for the public. So I would want that to be made much clearer for the public, much more black and white. This is what we're going to do with that money.
Well, I would suggest having a couple of town halls to talk about it, but we'll work that aspect of it out. This needs to be explanations. I had my doubts going into that, but thanks to the presentation here, I have a clearer picture of what is going on and what is needed.
Mayor, through the chair, if you
Yes,
would.
go ahead, sir.
Yeah, this is Jim Hollingsworth from Hennessy. I also wanted to let the mayor and council know that we have been working closely with the city manager and John Kazoo on looking for grants, any grants that might be available, or any kind of, asset management plans, anything that's out there that might help, with some kind of grants or distressed communities, things like that. So, as it goes on, we'll continue to let you know, how we're working, how that's all coming out and stuff as well.
Thank you, Jim. We haven't been that far out of receivership. It's only 5 years. And we were doing well in recovery, and this is gonna be a big hit, but it's something that we have to do. Anything further from council?
Your Honor, just a suggestion.
Yes, ma'am.
If we could have this PowerPoint put on, or just something maybe on the TV that says that you can refer to this PowerPoint from the website.
The PowerPoint was on, you could download it as part of the packet if you go to the city's website. But it should have been there. And then, this meeting is being recorded. They'll be able to review that too and go over that. Okay, did it freeze up again, or am I being heard? All right.
That was it, Your Honor.
Anything else from council? We'll open it up to citizens after we take care of the one action item that we have. So I would ask representatives from Plant Moran to remain with us for just a moment. So with that, I'll move to the action item. Carrie, I don't have the actual resolution, so could you read that for me?
Resolved that the Lincoln Park Goodfellows be granted permission to solicit donations on the streets of Lincoln Park December 4th through the 6th, 2020, and December 12th through the 13th, and December 19th through the 20th for their annual newspaper drive. All reporting provisions of the local ordinance to be timely observed. The application has been filed and the fees have been paid.
So moved.
Support.
Your Honor, to the chair.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Rules and responsibilities while they're out there.
You
They're going
broke.
to be walking up to people's cars. They should be wearing masks. I think in today's society, we have to be careful with that.
Well, as one who collects, we have been discussing the need for everyone to wear masks and to approach vehicles safely as such, and to keep distancing.
When they give the training to all the volunteers, they should just stress that. I don't.
Yes.
That should do.
Yes, that's all I'm wanting. That's all I want everybody to be safe, and I've collected in the past too, and I just want everybody to be safe.
Agree.
I hear you. Is there further discussion? Then clerk call the roll.
Are we adding that in as part of the resolution, or are we just going to trust that the Goodfellows are going to take those steps?
I would like that to be part of the motion. I think it should be. If someone would second it.
Well, ask the mover and supporter. I mean, if that's
right.
If that's all right, and then we won't need to do it. I mean, I don't have a problem with it.
As the mover, are you all right with adding that?
I'm okay adding that, but I'm sure the Goodfellows will go by the guidelines and wear masks. But go ahead, I'm good.
Councilwoman Ross?
Mayor, may I suggest that the language simply read, participants to observe all public health and safety requirements?
Councilman Higgins, will that be sufficient for you?
Yes, that's all I'm wanting.
Okay, is that good with the mover and supporter?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, do we have further discussion? Then clerk call the roll.
Councilperson Salcido?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Breeding?
Yes.
Dupre?
Yes.
Higgins?
Yes.
Tobin?
Yes.
And Mayor Kern?
Yes. All right, we'll move now to citizen communications. There is a 5-minute limit on the communications for those of you that may be doing it for the first time. I ask the city manager to unmute the participants.
I've asked everybody to unmute.
There you go. So, is there anyone that wishes to address the city council at this time?
Mayor, if there's no one addressing council, I don't know if you mentioned it this evening, the passing of Mrs. Shebold. Did you mention that?
No, I did not.
She just turned 100, and of course, she's the survivor of Mayor Max Shebold. No funeral arrangements have been announced yet.
Yes, we just mentioned the passing of Chief Waters' father last night. That's the only one that we did at the beginning of the meeting. So I'm not hearing any citizen communication. Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Support.
Okay, clerk call the roll.
Councilpersons Higgins,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Breeding,
Yes.
Dupre. Councilwoman, there we go.
Yes, sorry.
Salcido,
Yes.
Tobin,
Yes.
and Mayor Carnes.
Yes, I want to extend thank you to Plant Moran for doing this study. Kristen, Brian, you presented very well, and thanks to the representatives from Hennessy that were with us tonight and explaining this. We have a lot of things to go through here, but we appreciate you being here tonight and helping us get through this.
But bring us some good news next time.
Yeah. 100 million wouldn't hurt. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Thank you.